transformation project funded by JISC was to look at an organisational change that used JISC's existing resources and also resources from other HEI kind of supportive areas, like the Higher Education Academy. And what you had to do is identify a particular issue you were going to address. And the issue I wanted to address was the orientation and transition of international students into a blended learning environment. Now, part of the resources that we actually used for this was the Learning Literacies in the Digital Age project, and we were a case study in the LIDA project. I also used a lot of other JISC resources to support the things that we wanted to do. Well, the LIDA project gave me some background into what was perceived as digital competencies, and there were 4 that the LIDA project identified. And I looked at how I could weave these into some tasks that students would actually undertake to help them understand about what our expectations of blended learning and a digital learning environment meant. Okay, well, the students themselves, we asked them what technology they used prior to coming to the university, their first impressions of the university, and then during their teaching. And then we asked them about digital literacy, what it meant. And they really said, well, I'm not illiterate. And they saw it as either you are literate or illiterate. But all of them conceded that they didn't know all the things that they really should do, and they hadn't questioned a lot of things that they should have done. Things like digital identity, things like information authenticity and reliability, and where sources of information came from, and how they would actually then use them. But they still saw themselves as consumers and users, and therefore not illiterate. So it was too much of a black and white situation. Digital fluency as a concept meant that they had skills that needed to be built on. One of the really big issues is about gate-kept environments that are owned by an institution and a student has to log in and use. And I think they very much have their place. But when you look around a classroom, students will never ever be in the same situation again. They'll have their own devices, their own systems. As an institution, we can't afford the newest piece of technology, the newest piece of software. So in fact, the students themselves have often got better kit than we have in the teaching environment. I think we also need to stop and think that students are always doing emails and Facebooking, when in fact they could be using their technology to check a word, to look at a reference, to make notes that is in the style for them. iMindMap, I would use a piece of software to do that. So rather than saying that they're always doing negative things with their own technology, we should be actually saying, well, yeah, bring out your devices, use them to make your own notes, check this reference, go to this website, and actually be incorporating the use of their own devices rather than banning them. And I think we've got to recognise that students also have a voice about where they'd like the university to be. When we talked to the students, they didn't want to be friends with us. They didn't want us in their social spaces. However, they really valued us providing them with good learning and good learning materials in environments where they could go to if they wanted to, not us being in their face all the time, being in their social spaces, kind of like it's having your mom tapping you on the shoulder all the time going, have you remembered this? Have you done that? What would worry me is if we force students to go into environments, so for example Facebook. Some of my students don't want to be on Facebook, and in fact their families would object to them being on Facebook. It can also mean that some of our transnational students who, for example, might not have access to YouTube are disadvantaged unfairly. Students, I think, should be encouraged to have peer groups, but that's set up by them and owned by them and encouraged by them. If they want to invite tutors into that space, then fine. But I think I don't have a Facebook account. I would hate to be forced to have one just to do my learning or a piece of technology, unless it was part of my course. If it was part of a valid bit of my course, fair enough. But I would not want to be forced into an environment where I didn't feel comfortable. I think it's about talking to students, and it's about recognising that students may have greater abilities than an institution has, and that we don't always see that it's deficit. And that we force people into a particular way without really giving them the rationale behind what we're asking them to do and the way that we're asking them to do it.